Hey, if I haven't had the chance to meet you, I just want to say hello. My name is Justin. I get the privilege and honor of being one of the pastors on staff at Saints Community. And one thing that you're going to hear quite often at Saints Community is that we are one church in multiple locations, which means there's a church across the city right now meeting at the same time. We have a greater church family than what's represented in this room. And so, but we do share the same mission statement. We exist for the same reason. And that is to reach imperfect people to follow a perfect Jesus. Today, we are actually continuing a series entitled Obstacles and Opportunities. How many of you have ever faced an obstacle before? How many of you have lived long enough to know, maybe you've matured and you've learned that obstacles can actually become opportunities if we will invite God into the picture? Anybody been there? How many of you know your perspective matters? Your approach matters. How many of you know the way you look at something matters? What you believe about something matters. And today we're going to be looking at the life of Joseph like we've been in the last couple of weeks. Later today, I'm going to give a quick recap of everything that's happened. But for starters, I'm just going to let us know where we're at in the story. Right now, we're in the story where Joseph is in prison still. He is actually being called out of prison and into the palace. What's happening here in the story is Pharaoh, the ruler of all of Egypt, is having some dreams. He's having some dreams and he's getting a little freaked out because he doesn't know what they mean. Somebody in Pharaoh's presence speaks up and says, "Hey, Pharaoh, back when I was in prison, there was a man there. He interpreted my dream." And he says these words. He says, "If you did it for me, maybe he could do it for you, Pharaoh." Joseph goes in this part of the story from a prison to a palace. And today, I want to preach a message entitled, How to Prepare for Your Moment of Opportunity. How to prepare for your moment of opportunity. I'll never forget the day. It was October 22nd, 2011. I was freshly 21 years old. I'm talking I'd been 21 for about a couple of months, and I was about to say I do to the most beautiful woman in the world. There I was on my wedding day at 21 years old. I was so young. This was the first wedding I had even been to, and which made the wedding planning easy for me because my wife was like, "What do you think we should do? Should we do this first and that?" I was just like, "You got it." I didn't know. And I'll never forget being super excited and nervous because I'd never been married before. You know, at 21 years old, you don't know anything. Sorry for the 21-year-olds in the room, but 21 years old is still young enough to where if something goes wrong, you still call mama. How many of you, right? You're like, "Mom, I'm filling out a tax form for this new job. I don't know how to fill this form out." There's so many things. You haven't had a bank account that long. 21 years old, I was fresh and I was nervous, but I was also excited. I can tell you about the time, another moment, it was December 26th, and my wife was 9 months pregnant. And I was up late one night. I was with some guys from the church, and we were playing some video games. And the guys from the church said, "Hey, you know what, Justin? You're about to be a father. Who knows when the last time you will be able to pull an all-nighter? You should stay up all night and play the game with us." And I said, "You're making a lot of sense. Let's do that." The doctor told me that my wife's due date was December 29th. This was December 26th. And how many of you know, I thought the doctor, I thought he chose, he got it right on that day. And if you've lived a little while, you understand that's just a recommendation. The baby comes when the baby comes. And I'll never forget because December 26th, I'm there playing video games. 1 a.m. comes, 2 a.m. comes, 3 a.m. comes, and all of a sudden I hear somebody behind me. And my wife is standing there, and she said those famous words. She said, "Sweetie, my water broke. It's time." And I'll never forget it because I did pull an all-nighter that night. It was not how I anticipated it. But I take her to the hospital, and we're there all night. And December 27th at 4:36 p.m., we'd been awake for quite a while at that point, my daughter was born. And I remember this innate protective love that I felt for her. It was so natural. In a way, it felt like it had always been there. It was just unlocked. And I remember that day because I was both excited, but I was also nervous. I can tell you about this last February. I was invited to come and speak at a conference, and they said, Justin, we want to build this conference around, you're going to be the speaker. Over 1,000 students. And it was the first time anybody had flown me in and let me do that. And I felt excited, but I felt nervous. I can tell you about 2011, when I gave up everything in my life and moved to the city of New Orleans to help plant a church 6 months before the church would start. So because I didn't have any relationships, I didn't have a job, I didn't have relationships, friends, family, I didn't have anything here. So I needed to come here and put down roots and just prepare for what God was going to do. I was both excited and nervous. Today, I want to ask you, because there's really no guarantee that any of those things that I just mentioned would have worked out. There's no guarantee that I would have been a good father. There's no guarantee that I would have been a good husband. There's no guarantee that the church would have succeeded and thrived. There's no guarantee that any of that would have happened. How many of you know this? And maybe you're not even a Christian in the room. Maybe you're not even a Jesus follower in this place. I think we can all agree with the fact that we must spend our lives preparing for the opportunities that come our way. Because the results that opportunity produces is very much contingent on how much we prepared and or didn't prepare. How many of you have ever been in a moment that you weren't prepared for? How many of you have ever been in a moment where you did prepare? Maybe a test that you showed up well studied for. There is a difference to that experience, isn't there? And today, if we are mature people and if we are mature Christ followers, there's a question that we need to wrestle with. And it's this question right here. How do I prepare for the opportunities that God will bring my way? How do I prepare for the stages that God is going to set for me? How do I prepare for the things, the dreams, the call that God has placed in my life? How do I prepare for that? Because how many of you know opportunities come in many different forms? Sometimes they come in the form of a relationship. Sometimes they come in the form of a promotion. Sometimes they come in the form of a dream job. Sometimes it comes into the role of a position where now you have major influence. Sometimes they come in the form of a financial blessing. Somebody say amen. So, I'm still waiting on that one. But we need to view our life as preparation for the opportunities and moments that God is preparing us for. Because how many of you know this? If you've lived long enough, it's going to sound so obvious and yet so profound. Opportunities are either stewarded or they shrivel. Has anybody ever bought a plant? Some of y'all got green thumbs, and some of y'all don't care enough to have a green thumb. I love plants. I like the look of plants. I like the smell of plants. I like the feel of plants. But when my wife goes somewhere and she reminds me to water a plant, and I end up watering all the plants, I get in trouble. Any other husbands ever been there? You think you're helping, and then she gets home and she says, why did you water all the other plants? And I'm going, well, why would I only water one? Aren't the other ones thirsty? She goes, no, you water this one once a week or once every so often. You water this one every day. If you water this one too much, you'll kill it. I'm a plant murderer is all I'm trying to say. How many of you know that the way that we prepare, approach, care for, or neglect an opportunity determines whether or not it is stewarded well, or whether or not it shrivels? I've seen plenty of plants shrivel. So as we dive into this, we have to ask ourselves, how do we steward and prepare for the opportunities that God has for us? You better believe God has some opportunities for you. You better believe there are some divine moments that God will place you in. You better believe that God is going to come through and make good on his word. You better believe that there will come a moment in time where dreams become realities, where you step into a position where you are faced with approaching an opportunity. And I need you to understand this. The way that you prepare will make all the difference. I know we've got our church's softball team in the room. What's funny was we had somebody from our Belle Chase location in the text. I've been busy this season. I haven't been able to play, but there was a text that came through where somebody pulled a muscle, slight injury. How many of you have ever, and I'm not saying they did this, but it's just a good example. How many of you have ever lacked preparation before a sporting event? How many of you know as you get older, that preparation matters more and more, doesn't it? It matters. Preparation matters. And as we dive into this question, I want to recap Joseph's life. I promised I would do this earlier because Joseph's life is full of events. Joseph is actually a younger brother in a legacy Bible family. He comes from a family that's very relevant, but he's a younger brother, and he has a dream that God gives him, only he hasn't learned how to carry that dream well. He carries that dream arrogantly. He carries that dream with pride, and he goes to his older brothers, and he looks before them, and he says, and not only this, he's actually the father's favorite. How many of you have younger siblings? Yeah, the babies of the family, right? They get treated a little bit better, right? The older siblings, y'all are the most responsible people in the room, I promise. The younger ones, Joseph had favor. And he goes to his brothers and he tells them, you're all going to bow down before me one day. Arrogantly, self-centeredly. And his brothers' response to this, because they already didn't like him, is they begin to plot to kill him. Only siblings in the room will understand why you go from 0 to 100 in that story. One of his siblings stands up and says, hey, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into a pit and then sell him into slavery. And they do that. And then Joseph is purchased by a powerful man named Potiphar in a foreign land, and he actually gains leadership and influence. Things are going well. The Bible says that Potiphar had no needs. All of his needs were taken care of as long as Joseph was in charge. Things are getting better for Joseph until his wife begins to make advancements towards Joseph, and Joseph refuses. So she ends up throwing a false accusation his way, which later led Joseph to imprisonment. But Joseph is not just imprisoned, he begins to develop influence in the prison. And he ends up helping run the prison as a prisoner. And then he even develops a relationship in prison, and that person leaves the prison, but then that person forgets about Joseph. Joseph's life is a roller coaster of emotion. And then he arrives at this opportunity today, where he goes from being in a prison to being summoned into the palace. I want to read this to you, Genesis chapter 41. We're going to read quite a bit of scripture today as we wrap up Joseph's story. But the Bible says this: when 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and has a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. And then Pharaoh woke up again. It had been a dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them about his dreams, but nobody could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh, you were once angry with your servant and imprisoned me, and now a young Hebrew was there with me, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us. He gave each man the interpretation of his dream." Pharaoh, upon hearing this, sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. So Pharaoh, here's what's happening here. Pharaoh, who is the ruler of all of Egypt, has some dreams. He has some dreams about some cows, and he has some dreams about some grains, and he can't seem to make sense of them. And his cupbearer speaks up and says, "Hey, Pharaoh, I had a similar situation happen. I was in prison, and I had a dream, and somebody interpreted my dream, and that dream came to pass. If he did it for me, maybe he can do it for you, Pharaoh." I want to give you point 1 on how to prepare for your moment of opportunity. It's going to sound simple, but those that have lived a bit longer, you know how challenging this can be. And step number one for how to prepare for your moment of opportunity is to steward your obstacle seasons the same as your opportunity seasons. You have to steward the hard stuff. You have to steward the unseen things just as much as you would steward the great things. How many of you have ever raised kids and you're trying to teach your kids, no, you have to brush your teeth. You cannot just care about baseball. This is the wrestling match in my home with my son. The way that you do anything is the way that you will do everything, Isaiah. I need you to learn how to do the small things, the hard things, the things you don't want to do. Both of my kids are driven. Both of my kids are passionate. But my son is only passionate about the things that he cares about. The things that he loves. Dad, if it's baseball, if it's football, if it's soccer, we're going to give 110%. But if it's picking up after myself, if it is doing anything outside of what I want to do, and as I'm raising him, I'm trying to teach him the value of doing the things that are seen as obstacles. Because I want you to see something here. Joseph is getting this opportunity to do something in the palace that he had already been doing in the prison. I don't know what your gifts are. I don't know what you enjoy doing. I don't know what you love doing. I don't know what your dream is. I don't know what your gift is. I don't know what the thing is that motivates you. But I need you to hear me on this. Look at Joseph's life here. Joseph was able to do the same thing regardless of the circumstances. The same thing regardless of the setting. The same thing regardless of the audience. The way that you prepare in moments of obscurity will determine whether or not you are ready for moments of opportunity. I want you to hear this. It's such a hard lesson to learn because people will hear this and they'll say, so what are you saying, Pastor? What I'm saying is we have to learn to be faithful. We have to learn to be faithful in not just the exciting things. I remember when we first started baseball, my son did not want to play first base because he didn't want the ball thrown at him every play. He only wanted to bat. Dad, I just want to do that. No, son, you got to be well-rounded. You got to learn it. You got to learn the game. You got to work hard at this too. This is part of it. You don't just get to do that. Every inning, you're going to be in the outfield. You better learn how to play. I want to challenge you to stay faithful to what God has in front of you right now. Stay faithful to the gifts that he's given you in this moment. Stay faithful with the people that he's called you to right now. I'll never forget, I was called to preach at 16 years old. I had somebody come up to me recently. They said, Pastor, I feel called to preach. What do I do? I said, the first thing you need to do is you need to go next door to the Student Life Center. You need to talk to Elder Jen DeGear, and you need to sign up for Varsity Saints. And you need to speak on Sundays. You let her. She'll let you speak every Sunday. I tell her you want to grow in this, and you speak to those kids with the same passion, with the same preparation that you would speak to adults. I tell this to multiple people. Majority of the time when I tell this to people, they don't go over there. You want to know why? Because people think and sometimes make the assumption that it's the platform that develops you, that it's the setting that shapes you, that it's the elevated platform that you stay. If you do this enough, you'll get good at it. No. You have to learn to do some things in secret. You got to learn to put in the work when nobody's watching. You got to learn to be faithful when there's no immediate reward. You got to learn to do it and do it and do it, even when there's no fruit that's being produced from the faithfulness. Oh, if there's one lesson I could teach Gen Z today. You got to learn to do the hard work while it's still hard. Don't just work hard later. Don't just work hard someday. Work now. It's where you develop the grit, the mental toughness, the mental fortitude to endure and persevere when the platform eventually comes, friends. We've got to learn that oftentimes God prepares us in a different setting, in a different place, in a different season for the very thing that he's called you to later. Right? That's so good, Pastor. Sorry, it's a little quiet, so... Point number 2, for how to prepare for your moment of opportunity. Number 2, if you're taking notes today, approach your opportunities knowing who God is and knowing who you are not. Approach these opportunities knowing who God is and knowing who you are not. How many of you know the number one determining factor of success is not IQ, it's actually EQ. EQ is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence can be described in many ways, but one of them is the ability to self-regulate, self-evaluate, to self-awareness, to grow in self-awareness, which really means to grow in humility, to see yourself exactly as you are, not as you want to see yourself. How many of you know that's a hard thing to grow in? There's an old saying that says experience does not make you better. Evaluated experience makes you better. This is why you can meet somebody who's 60 years old on the job and they've plateaued. You can meet somebody at 40 years on the job and they are actually better than the 60-year-old. Why? Because if one person will come to the plate, will step up and evaluate their experience and say, what was wrong? What could have been better? What was missing? What was confusing? What role did I play in the downfall of the team? What can I do? How can I improve? Where can I make space for God to speak into this? It'll make all the difference. It'll allow you to learn who you are and what you did and what you didn't do. How many of you know when you're younger, you take more than your fair share of the credit? Hello? And the older you get, you learn to even share credit with those. You'll learn to say things like, it was a team effort. You'll learn to say things like, I know I was in charge, but I couldn't have accomplished that without the people around me. You'll learn to say things like, hey, thank you for the compliment, but you really should be telling this person thank you. They spent an enormous amount of time working on this. When you're young, you just go, I mean, it's kind of what I do. There's a maturity that comes over time. But can I just tell you this? God can speed that up. God can do a work in you. God can give you perspective. God can humble you. God can give you maturity. Listen to Joseph's story right here. Pharaoh said to Joseph, he said, I had a dream and nobody can interpret it. But I've heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Here's what Joseph says. He says, I can't do it. He says, well, hang on, pause right there, Pharaoh. It's actually not me. This was Joseph's opportunity to hype himself up. This was Joseph's opportunity to get gassed and to say, well, you know, Pharaoh, how much do you want to pay for it? I've got the recommended dream interpretation plan. I've got the pro dream interpretation plan. I've got the elite. How much do you want, Pharaoh? It could have been the moment where he could have stepped up and said, well, Pharaoh, they do call me Joseph, the dream interpreter. It is what I'm known for. But he doesn't do that. You want to know what Joseph does? There's humility about him in this moment. He says, I can't do it. Joseph replies to Pharaoh, verse 16, and he says, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Joseph had the moment to put the spotlight on him. You know what Joseph does? Joseph defers the spotlight and attention and puts it on the Father. He puts it on God. He puts it on the one that actually made him able to interpret dreams. Many of us know the beginning of Joseph's story. He's arrogant. He's self-centered. He goes to his brothers and he's braggadocious and he says, look what God's going to do. You're all going to bow before me. And now here, Joseph's different now. This is the same person matured. This is the same person, but with more humility, with more wisdom. If it was true in the past that he told his brothers his previous dreams in a self-glorifying way, any such self-confidence was now gone, was now removed, done away with. Joseph had now learned that outside of the Lord's doing, nothing was going to happen. Outside of God, no good thing is possible in my life. Because God's work of character building was being accomplished in Joseph, in the pit, in the prison, and even now in the palace. Pharaoh gave Joseph a golden opportunity to glorify himself, to make much of himself, and he refuses and instead chooses to glorify God instead. Can I just tell you this? I think sometimes God allows us to go through process. Sometimes God allows, isn't it interesting that the distance between where you are and point A and point B, where you want to be, that there's something in between that lives called the process? And so many times we want to rush the process. But look at Joseph's life. If you rush the process, Joseph is now standing before Pharaoh, or without the process, he doesn't even get that far. And not only does he not get that far, he is not the humble, wise, a meek person that we see today. Not ready to rule, not ready to help, not ready to serve. My encouragement to you would be, don't resent the process, church. Don't resent the season of obscurity that you might be in. Don't resent the hiddenness of your life right now. Don't resent the reality that nobody sees you right now, or at least it might feel that way. Don't resent it. Don't let your heart get bitter. Don't let your heart get cold. Don't let your heart harden. Please keep believing that God will work all things, Romans 8:28, for the good of those that love him. He wastes nothing. He uses everything. And he's using it to shape you. He's using it to prepare you. You might be in process, but nothing's wasted. And look at Joseph right here. He refuses to bring himself glory, and he gives God glory instead. Let me just say it this way. God wants to use your story and your process to bring himself glory. God wants to use your life so that you may stand before people like Pharaoh, people of great influence, that when they look at you and they honor you and they acknowledge you and they celebrate you, you can step aside and go, not me, him. I didn't get myself here. I didn't do the inner work that I couldn't have done. God put me in a position to where I am a different individual standing before you. God did it. Not for your glory, but for his glory. God exalted him through suffering so that Joseph would not trust in his own flesh, but that Joseph would look to God. I just need you to know, sometimes the pain of process, sometimes the frustration of hurt is the very thing that teaches us that when we fall on our face, there's only one place to turn to. That when we go through hard things, there's only one God that's good enough to praise even when it's hard. That when we've lived enough life, we've learned there's only one person, one God, one Son of God, Jesus, to turn to. Only he keeps his word. Only he's consistent in his faithfulness. The story of Joseph can be summarized in really kind of two themes right here. It's the story about a man that is faithful to God, but there's a second part. It's the story about a God that is faithful to a man. God is faithful, friends. So don't resent the process. Don't resent the development. And listen, development and process is not limited to certain ages. So you may be in here and you may go, nah, I'm past that. Maybe God still has some things to do in you. Maybe God still has a dream and a plan and a purpose to elevate you even in an older age, and maybe he's at work in you right now. Please know that God sees you. Please know that he's working on it with you, and he's working in you while you're working on it. Step number 3 on how to prepare for your moment of opportunity. Surround yourself with the supernatural. Surround yourself with God's power. Become a person, a man or a woman of God that says, I want to experience God. I want to know God. I want to be in the presence of God. If there's a prayer meeting, I want to be there because if God moves, I don't want to miss it. If there's a worship service, I want to be there because when God is worshiped, things happen. When God comes in the room, things change, people change, circumstances change. I believe in the power of God. And I'm telling you today, we have to be men and women of God that dig deep wells. How do you dig a deep well? Deep wells are dug in peace and quiet time with God. Deep wells are dug. Have you ever dug a hole? I remember removing palm trees out of the front of this church. Do you know the root system of palm trees? I do. It's awful. You got to dig and dig and dig, and then when you think there's no more roots, there's more roots. Can I just tell you, there is work that is worth doing. There is labor that is worth enduring. There is fighting that is worth getting in the ring and not quitting and keep going. Perseverance is developed. But when you develop this, what happens when the moment of opportunity comes? You've got a deep well to pull from. There are people that have shallow wells, and that's why they have very little to offer. But those, and you've met them, The men and women of God that have spent their lives digging deep wells, and that when a moment comes, when wisdom is needed, when counsel is needed, when leadership is needed, they will pull from their deep well. They will pull from their peace and quiet time with God. This is so important. It's so vital. And if I can have the band come up front, I want to read this portion of scripture here. Surround yourself with God's power. Verse 28 here says, "It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food." The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and all of his officials. So Pharaoh asks them, he says, "Can we find anyone like this man?" Listen to what Pharaoh says about Joseph. He says, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. So you shall be in charge of my palace, and all of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Can I just tell you, this didn't happen because Joseph was great. This happened because Joseph had a great God, and he spent time in God's presence. Let me just tell you this. The Bible says promotion doesn't come from the east or the west. It comes from the Lord. Promotion and advancement are from the Lord, but promotion and advancement are never enough without the Lord. That's why you can achieve position and prominence, and it's not fulfilling. That's why you can achieve a number one spot and not be content. That's why you can earn a lot of money, and it's still not enough. Listen to me, this is not to say that hard work and good habits don't contribute to success. They do. But there is a realm of having God's Spirit in you that you'll never reach by yourself. When you are a person of God's presence, when you have been with God, can I just tell you this? People can tell. And when people can tell, even if they don't know what it is, even if they can't put words to it, they can sense it. And many of you have heard this. Something's different about you. Something is, I can't quite put my finger on it. Pharaoh had plenty of priests and magicians that I'm sure they worked hard. I'm sure they developed winning habits. I mean, look at where they are in proximity to Pharaoh. And yet none of them had these words spoken about them. Joseph was a man within whom is the Spirit of God. Pharaoh looks at Joseph and says, God is in you. And this supernatural ability to hear from God that is developed when you get in God's presence and you learn to hear his voice and you learn to know when God is impressing something upon you. When you learn to discern, I don't think this is my own thought. I don't think this is my own idea. I feel like this is God. I feel like God wants to take us in this direction. My plan was to do this, but I feel like God is changing it. Your ability to discern that, your ability to know that, your ability to hear God's voice, it's found in learning to remain hidden and not just remain hidden anywhere, but remain hidden in God's presence. This should be something that is done regularly. In fact, this is the first mention in the Bible of the Holy Spirit coming upon a man. I just have to ask us today, because we will all go through process to a degree. We will all go through obstacles and opportunities, but I want to ask you a question that will make all the difference when you stand before an obstacle or an opportunity. And it is this: is the power of God in you? Is there that difference maker about you? I want to challenge you, because if there's one thing that I have labored and beaten this dead horse over and over to my students in our youth ministry is, are you a person of God? A man or woman of God? Do you know God's word? Do you know God's presence? Are you somebody that acknowledges his goodness when the moment or opportunity comes? Friends, are you a person that has the power of God in you? Have you received the Holy Spirit in your life? Do you have the ability to hear his voice and operate in a supernatural way that, watch this here, distinguishes you and glorifies him? that sets you apart, but allows you to act and operate like a mirror that is just reflecting and taking them back to God. Earlier today in our pre-service prayer, Christy was leading, and I looked right here. This little power cord right here had fallen out of her keyboard. And she was playing, and you could hear it, and then all of a sudden, you couldn't hear it. Those of you that were here this morning, you were smiling because you remember, and she grabs the mic, and she goes, well, I guess we're just going to sing without the keyboard. Can I tell you, that keyboard was designed to make sound. That keyboard serves a purpose. It was designed to come around everything else that was happening in the room and add value, add substance, add something to the room that wasn't there previously. But the moment you remove the power from it, it can no longer do what it was designed to do. Its purpose is no longer fulfilled. And it's stepped away from because it can't be a part of what's happening anymore. Friends, you have to be people that get alone, that get away, that retreat from the crowd. I tell my students this: you need to have a plan of prayer, a place of prayer, and a time of prayer. Your time and place of prayer, you can tell I'm getting excited. Your time, your place, and your plan. Those three things will make you a person of God's presence. If you can create a time every day, 7 a.m., in this room, in this patio, in this backyard, in this dinner table. What's your plan? I'm going to read through this, or I'm going to do a devotion here. It's a setting. It's a constant. It's a revisiting. It's a regularity. It's a routine. Friends, you have got to establish a routine. It'll make all the difference in your life. Because right now, Christy, would you just play something? You could play anything. See what happens when you're connected to a power source? You see the beauty, the elegance, the distinctiveness? It's almost like some in the room changed. That's what happens when you become a person of prayer, a person of the presence of God, and you go into your workplace, you go into your family, you go into your neighborhood. All of a sudden, you start producing things that you couldn't have produced otherwise. So important. Last point today, how to prepare for your moment of opportunity, is to use your position to profit and to serve others. This right here, this power, this gift, can I tell you, Christy is actually using it to serve our church right now. That's her gift. But what's your gift? And is your gift about you, or is your gift being let go of, submitted? Is it being shared? Because I can just tell you, there have been many seasons where I've kept my gift to myself. Many of you might not know this. I actually don't really like preaching. Pastor Wayne has to make me, because I'll go, only now we have 2 campuses and 2 locations. And so now there's, if Pastor Wayne is gone, which he says hello from Bell Chase today, by the way. If he's gone, it forces me into it. You want to know why? Because we can get in our own way, our own insecurities, our own things we don't like, our own lack of, etc. You fill in the blank there. But we can very easily keep our gifts to ourselves. Only God doesn't want He didn't give you your gift for you. The Bible says they are gifts given without repentance, meaning we did nothing to earn or deserve them. There are people that are using their gifts for themselves every day. This is when I look at super successful people and I go, that's a gift that was given to them. It may not be a submitted gift, but that gift is being used. You can use your gift for yourself. Or you can bring your gift into the presence of God and say, God, whatever you want to do, however you see fit, however you want to use it. God, I'll let go. God, I'll surrender. God, I'll submit. God, you have your way. My life is yours. Verse 41, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and he put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, and he puts a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Look at Joseph's life. It's completely turned around. Look at this tragic story and look at how God uses it. Pharaoh puts his signet ring on Joseph's hand. This was a ring of authority. I want you to know, once Joseph wore the shackles of a prisoner, and now he has the signet ring of Pharaoh on his own head. Once, right here, Joseph is clothed in garments of fine linen. But once Joseph had the rags of a dungeon. Once Joseph had the garments of a prisoner. They put a gold chain around his neck. Once Joseph had the chains of a slave. He had the chains of being somebody's property, and now he's got a golden chain around his neck. Not right now, he's riding in the second chariot, only second to Pharaoh. Joseph once walked as a slave. I want you to see Joseph steps into a dream fulfilled. He steps into a moment where God makes good on his word, because he always does, church. But watch how Joseph uses his newfound influence. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance, and he stored it in the cities, and in each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end. And then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the land of Egypt there was food. And when all of Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. And then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians over the whole country, go to Joseph and do what he tells you. Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the world came to Egypt. Listen to this. All of the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine wasn't just local to them, it was everywhere. Joseph didn't use his position and influence to gain more for himself, friends. Instead, he used it to serve others. He's literally going to help the world. God wants to give you influence, but he wants to give you influence, church, not just for your own sake, but for the sake of others, to be of service. Listen to me. If you're too big to serve, you're too small to lead. Listen to me. You got to get in God's presence, because God dwells in the heart of a servant. And the more you get in his presence, the more he will remind you that he was the servant of all, that he washed feet, that he came down and put on skin to be among you and I. It would be like you and I looking at an ant pile and going, you know what? I'm going to become like one of them. I'm going to become an ant and I'm going to live among them. Jesus put on humility, friends. Talk about an example. And I have to ask, as we close out the service today, do your dreams of opportunity revolve around how you can serve those around you and serve the world? Or are they just about how we can make our own lives better and easier? I want to end right here today. We've talked about obstacles and opportunities, but I want to get our attention on Jesus. Because Jesus is actually the better Joseph. Jesus is the perfect Joseph. You know, there's a lot of similarities between Joseph and Jesus. The Bible says no one does this better than Jesus, who is the better Joseph. Look at what Paul said about Jesus when he wrote to the church in the city called Philippi. He said, in your relationships to one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Joseph is betrayed. Jesus was betrayed. Joseph is shackled. Jesus was arrested. Joseph is accused. Jesus was accused. Jesus died so that we could be forgiven. And here we have Joseph's end of the story where he forgives his family. And in verse 45, the passage of today that we read, Pharaoh gives Joseph the name Zaphanath Paneah. What does that mean? We're going to put it up on the screen. It means that God speaks and God lives through his Redeemer. I want you to know the reason I brought up the fact that Jesus is the better Joseph is because it's foreshadowing and it's setting up the New Testament. It's setting up what would happen. But you and I have to understand when we read the story, sometimes we read ourselves into the story and we view ourselves as the main character. I just need to let us know today, this is going to be humbling, but it's the reality of it. You and I are not Joseph in this story. You want to know who you and I are in this story? We're the people in the land that have no food to eat. We're the people in the land that are starving. We're the people in the land that need leadership and guidance. We're the people in the land, and look at this in this story today. We are the people going through famine who need a Redeemer to feed us, and Jesus is the bread of life.